Hello and welcome back to ELT Under the Covers. We are back again with another ELT React, where we as English language teaching professionals, we react to the good, the bad of teaching clips that we see from the internet. But first, introductions. I am Neil of Team Teacher, and I am with the master of DuckDuckGo, Young Rich.
Yeah, you know, DuckDuckGo recently advertising for job positions. Anyone out there does data science or is into search algorithms, go check it out. My preferred search engine when using this program. Hello, everybody. My name is Professor Rich. I teach English and I talk about teaching.
And today we're going to be talking about teaching within a specific country, because we are going to the motherland. We are going to Mother Russia.
That's the one.
I feel like I'm already there, yeah. We've got a Russian comedy sketch show, and they're lampooning the English language teaching, learning process. So we're going to have a look at that and see how accurate that might be, and if we can get any good teaching practices from that.
Exciting.
I feel like it's going to be much better than the West.
Vodka and that sounds German.
I don't know why.
Vodka and bear wrestling.
That's what I hope with my English class.
Vodka. Da.
Okay. Duck, go, that Young Rich.
Accurate.
What's the hair?
Hello, little tractorists.
Does it need to be a bit louder?
Yeah, so whack it up a bit.
Yeah.
I am a robot. You are potato. We are class. Yes, we are. Okay. Lesson 3. Listen me about river.
Виктор Иванович, я не готов, у меня собака умерла. Да.
Your horse is frog? Congratulations. London is the capital of Great Britain. Stupid squirrel. Stupid squirrel. Who is
Generally
Kovacs?
don't touch the kids.
Я, Виктор Иванович.
Kovacs. What do you do?
Иванова отсутствует сегодня.
Chicago Bulls.
Excuse me, teacher. May I come in?
In English, please.
That was good.
Lesson 5. Tous ensemble, camarades. The Bible of Line. Kovacs, listen me about family.
Мазер.
No.
Фазер.
No. Okay. I am robot. You are TV set. Little movie, Dogs and Flowers. We are butterfly. Pearl Harbor. Complete me? Okay. Call of Duty. Tractorists. Luftwaffe for robot. Tomorrow altogether $50 на шторы. I fly, welcome to hell.
What was that?
That was a gem. That's a gem that we've discovered there. So let me have a think here. So I guess what we're
Call of
talking about
Duty,
here
$50.
I suppose it's partly poking fun at the idea of the teaching that happens in schools. I guess the state schools teachers who can't really speak the language that they're teaching very well.
Yeah.
And therefore it all becomes a bit of a mess. I mean, it's similar to the thing we've seen before with teacher apprenticey and all that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that kind of idea. And we know that this is a real thing and happens for a variety of reasons. One being that people get into the school system, the kind of state school system, to become a teacher one way. And that way normally doesn't necessarily involve attaining sort of fluency or high level in the language. And often...
Or even caring for the language.
Well, or even caring for the language, or caring for teaching as well.
Yeah, it's a government job, yeah.
Countries all sort of worldwide seem to have these problems with in-state schools specifically. I'm not saying that all state schools teachers are not good teachers, because you definitely get good ones. I mean, I remember having good ones when I was a kid, so I'm sure you still do. But there certainly is a phenomena of people going into state school teaching because, as you say, it's a good, reliable job with a nice salary, pension, all that kind of stuff. And to them, it's a job. So they might not know their subject that well, and they certainly might not care whether they're effectively teaching. And I guess this is something that pretty much anyone can relate to. Even English people who've studied French or Spanish at school and learned nothing can then, maybe study the language outside of school and realize that why did I waste my time for 6 years in school trying to learn this stuff?
I actually remember in French class listening to audio CDs, with French speakers and lessons and stuff like that. And then me thinking, and just now thinking, hold on, I was basically doing Pumsler or, Rosetta Stone in the class.
Really? Is that what they did? They did sort of, how do you say this in French type stuff?
Yeah, they were.
Oh, really?
They had that.
Okay.
It's kind of like they were just probably following a course book or something.
Audiolingualism.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I didn't do any of that in French. The kind of thing we did, there was lots of reading comprehension, and there was reading comprehension, vocabulary activities, and listening comprehension. So listening comprehension, where you would listen to someone synthetically and very slowly have a conversation, and then you'd have to answer questions about it in English, which is the weird thing. So the textbooks were actually in English, and it would say, like, was he asking for a coffee? Or, was he going to the bus stop? So you're answering questions in English about the French conversation, which was a little bit odd. And I remember there was very little actual French speaking that happened in the class. There were certainly drills. And I think one time we sort of learnt a song, and the most French speaking I ever remember doing was, there was a bit of an exam we had to do where we had to speak for 1 minute, but we could prepare for as long as we wanted. So everyone just regurgitated this thing. You just kind of learned this thing and then regurgitated it. And then you went in and you had to do this thing for 1 minute. And I remember doing it. And I remember knowing that the things I was saying were kind of nonsense. It was probably like really broken French.
Yeah.
My pronunciation was probably awful. And I had no idea really what any of it meant. I just learned it off by heart. I mean, what is the point? What is the point? I don't know if it's still that bad, but it's a far cry from effective language teaching, isn't it?
It's a very far cry, and I think it's one of those ones where they want to be able to market, it's standardized, so they do this process and they want to just be able to give it to a teacher that's not necessarily a French teacher or a Spanish teacher, just any teacher that can flip up. All right, page 33, you say this, here we go. That sort of jazz.
Well, I think also the language teachers in the state schools are not particularly the highly paid positions necessarily, are they? So they're not that competitive. You compare it to like physics, which is, relatively high paid in the school system, because these things are based on demand. It's difficult to find people who've done a degree in physics who then are actually going to go and become a teacher, because there's a hell of a lot more things you can do with physics rather than go and become a teacher in a school. But then, if you study sort of French at university, sorry, but maybe you don't quite have as many career options as someone who studied physics. I studied philosophy. I know all about this. So I did have a look some time ago about doing a PGCE and becoming a school teacher. Wasn't sure whether I was actually going to do it or just have it as a backup. And I found that with a degree in philosophy, the only one I could actually go into would be religious studies. And I was kind of like, oh. So I didn't do that anyway.
Okay. Well, but
you have to teach what you're passionate about.
I think so as well, or that you're at least interested in or curious in that, because it gives off that energy, right?
Yeah.
What I noticed with in that clip though was that he is speaking English. TV said butterfly, and then asking questions and stuff like that. But the answers he's getting back is all in Russian, and I've noticed that sometimes that people, teachers, when they just get accustomed to something, they forget. So like I've done observations, and when the teachers knows a bit of the native language, or they know moderately well that they can understand, sometimes kids will answer back in their local language, Chinese, Korean, whatever, and the teacher will be like, oh, okay, and then move on to the next one because they don't hear it. Have you ever encountered that?
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. Yeah. All right, it can easily be done if you're kind of being a little bit too bilingual in the class. That's the can of worms, isn't it? How much can we lose the other languages in the class? Whole range of different opinions on this. There's even the idea that so-called code switching can be an advantage. This is what modern linguists will argue. There's nothing wrong with code switching between languages, and the idea that it's stigmatized is like some sort of native elitism or whatever. In other words, whatever the majority language is, you're kind of repressing the other languages by demanding that they stay in the language that you can understand. I don't know. And it becomes a political issue as well in countries like Spain, where, I remember someone telling me about how they'd gone to a meeting. The meeting had been advertised in Valencian. They went to the meeting, and there's a guy there who said, we all, I don't really speak Valencian. We all speak, Castellano. Can we not do the meeting in Castellano? And the guy said, sorry, the meeting was advertised in Valencian. It's Valencian, and I can see kind of both sides of that. Yeah. Someone's going to get frustrated there where they're thinking everyone here can speak Spanish though. But then on the other hand, you've got people saying, yeah, but if we all speak Spanish all the time, what's going to happen to Valencia? It's not going to exist. So whole can of worms. And then we got onto the issue of using it in the classroom. So I think that there are definitely some advantages to allowing some degree of L1 in the classroom. That is the native language of your students, particularly if the teacher can understand it. So whenever I'm teaching a Spanish speaker, it does become an option for them. But you just have to be careful it doesn't become a crutch. Yeah. Because if it just gets to a stage where every single time they don't know a word, they're just like, how do you say that? How do you say that? How do you say that? And you have to get to the point where you're like, look, try and explain it in English, because what's going to happen when you're speaking to a German who can just about speak English and hasn't got a clue about Spanish? Yeah. And then you have to explain it to them. You can't just say, como se dice, whatever. Yeah. So, yeah, but I think it does have a use. It can be used in several different ways. And I do think it's a strength, or it can be a strength, let's say, if the teacher does know the language of the students that they're teaching. And
wields the power wisely.
Yeah, I suppose, or like at least crafts,
I just wanted to say something poignant.
At least crafts an environment. At least crafts an environment where it's discouraged but can be used as a last resort. See, this is the thing. I'm using the word discouraged, and already, I can kind of imagine the linguists, the modern applied linguists, just shaking their heads. Oh no, what is this elitism? Because I remember they told these stories of how, someone would have like the rock of shame, which is like this heavy necklace. And like when you spoke a word that wasn't English in the English class, you had to wear the rock of shame, right? And I remember hearing this when I was doing my master's in applied linguistics, and they were kind of saying it like, oh, how terrible. They stigmatize the use of this person's mother tongue. And I sort of kept to myself that actually I did something like that. When I was in Vietnam, I used to have what I called the special hat. And I always used to do it like that as well. I was like, oh, you're going to have to wear the special hat. And the special hat actually was an empty cup of coffee. I'd finished drinking my coffee, and then I basically would just get the coffee cup and just put it on the head of a student if they were just speaking way too much Vietnamese. But these were teenagers, right? So some of these Vietnamese teenagers, like especially the girls for some reason, just rah, 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 rah in Vietnamese, even though they spoke pretty good English, you know. And when it got a bit too much, they'd wear the special hat. And I'd say, you wear the special hat until I catch someone else speaking Vietnamese. And then they'd be looking for it. They'd be, oh, he's speaking Vietnamese now. He gets the special hat, and the special hat would go around the class. So, you know, that's kind of a rock of shame thing. Okay. And I was using it, and I thought it was fun, and it worked. And I don't think anyone would be like traumatized from that experience to the extent where they'd go away and be like, oh my God, I feel so bad speaking Vietnamese. Everyone wants me to speak English. I guess
maybe a little
classroom
embarrassed.
It might happen. I don't think they were embarrassed even. Most of the time they found it funny. In fact, it like almost became a point where it wasn't a deterrent. And then I had to be a bit careful, because then it's just like people want to wear the special hat and you've got a big problem. So no, I don't think they were even embarrassed by it. But most of the time they didn't like wearing it, just because having a cup on your head's a bit daft, isn't it?
Yeah.
But no, they weren't like massively embarrassed. I think if I'd sensed that someone, this is the thing, isn't it? It's whether you trust your teachers to really care about the students and actually have an effective sense for this kind of thing, whether they can tell, you know, whether their students are getting traumatized or not. And then they have to make that call. If you do something like that and like someone just reels back, you know, then obviously it's just calibration, isn't it? Teachers' ability to calibrate the kind of things that they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, it's a massive, there's a whole range of different things you can say about allowing L1 in the classroom. I mean, how about you? Did you ever, especially like working in China where you don't really speak much Chinese, are there any situations where you actually would find it useful for the students to be able to use some Chinese?
Sometimes it's really difficult to control the amount of L1 use when you have 60 plus students in class, and those students are generally grade 1 to 3, so they're babies basically. You know, this is like their first time in school. You know, there's a big leeway.
Probably can't even speak Chinese very well.
No, you know, like they can't read in Chinese. You know,
wow.
I remember doing classes in Korea with really young kids, and you know, the course book needed us to learn about time, and they didn't even know time in Korean, or just time. You know, how to read a watch and all that sort of stuff.
So that's cognitive challenge, isn't it?
Exactly.
Do they have the cognitive ability to deal with this? Not linguistic limitation necessarily. This is the thing I was talking about that I really got out of doing the TEFL.
Yeah.
This idea of when you're planning a lesson, you consider these different elements, these different kind of mental aspects that the kids have. One of them was like cognitive challenge, and you want it to be in the middle. Like it has to be a bit challenging to be interesting, but then if it's too little, it'll be boring, and if it's too much, they can't do it. So with little kids, for example, expecting them to be able to tell the time, it's too high. So they're either going to need support, or the challenge needs to be easier.
Doing long activities. You know, it needs to be very segmented, punchy. This, next thing. and slowly over
Yeah.
time you can kind of stretch stuff out and let activities sit a little bit more. But to go
Yeah.
back to talking about the L1 with the little kids in China,
Mm.
generally what I found was they will talk L1 to their other friends or something if they get excited about it, excited about something in class, or they're commenting on me or something that the other kids have did. But like the kids that I'm interacting with, they wouldn't, and they were really into learning English, so they wanted to use English. It was the only time that they would use it would be if they were trying to explain, and sometimes you would get little helpers. I would have my own little helpers that if there was a kid that didn't understand, they would say what to do in L1, and I'll allow that because it was such a
Yeah.
varied level as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and it was more focused on
Yeah.
creating a fun and engaging environment rather than penalizing them
Yeah.
not speaking English when they don't have any English.
Yeah.
They don't have any. So, for me to put down the boot on that
Yeah.
would be absolutely ridiculous. So what, they're going to
I
go
think
around just saying hello, 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 like a little
Yeah,
minion or something?
I think in that situation you could argue that it's helping to scaffold. You've got 60 students; they don't all speak that well, so you're helping them to bridge the gap to achieve something they wouldn't ordinarily be able to achieve by allowing another student to help them using L1. Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, other situations when I've allowed it is when groups have been working together to plan something like a presentation type thing in English, and sometimes I'll allow use of the native language for that, or sometimes is the wrong word to say. I have in the past allowed it under certain circumstances, and it's kind of an idea of, well, what's the objective? What's the rationale? What's the objective? And is there going to be some advantage? In that case, we were focused quite a lot on the product rather than the process. So, we wanted, this was presentation stuff at a summer school. So presentations tend to be very product oriented, although, the methodology would tell us to focus more on process. But as we're focused on product, then we wanted the best sort of presentations, and enabling them to use their native language when they were planning that presentation, because these guys didn't have a high enough level really to be getting into functional language for that task that would be appropriate. Then that allows them to produce a better product. You could argue, well, why not make it all about process? Yeah, and I think there's validity in that as well. But I guess the point is that it's not black and white. It's an area where judgments need to be made, and I do think actually that, in my opinion, use of L1 has been overly stigmatized in language learning in general. Especially, we often talk about that sort of CELTA level language learning, and I think in my experience, I think it has been over stigmatized by that, and it's probably under stigmatized in the kind of like, let's say, backpacker teacher who speaks a bit of the student's L1 but hasn't done a CELTA. In that situation, it's probably under stigmatized. You get people relying on their Spanish a lot, and rather than learning how to actually teach the language, they'll just fire off everything in Spanish. So it's a balancing act. But because I'm in the sort of post CELTA circles, then I experience, I think, the over stigmatization more than anything.
Yeah. And I do lean more into using L1 when appropriate. I mean, it's difficult to outline when it is appropriate, when it's not, because there's all these classroom situations are very, very different. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that, and we've talked about this before, the loan words is, especially with young kids, is a really great way to get them to kind of realize that they actually know English already. They just and then they just need to change the pronunciation a lot. So if I could ever find a word that I knew that they used in their native language that was a loan word, and then I could just kind of flip it and be like, oh, this is the pronunciation. Like in China, it was a mangua or mango. And then you go, wow, so all you have to do is do this. And I mean, obviously, it will lead them down the road of trying to pronounce their own language like an English speaker sometimes. But, it starts to get the wheels turning and realize that it's not that difficult, not that different if they've already got a base there. And it really helps, especially like when you're in Europe and you've got all the European languages, because then it's just you've got a whole word bank that you don't realize that you just need to kind of tweak the pronunciation with. And so kind of get that. I feel, as you said, like code swapping is it can bridge it. It can help the bridge.
Yeah, it can. I mean, we did our master series on Michelle Thomas, didn't we?
Yeah.
A big part of what he does is kind of teaching people are they called cognates? Is that the right word? When you have words that are from the same root in different languages.
I'm not sure. If only we had a young person with the technical ability to DuckDuckGo in an instant.
Yeah, I'm actually using the G word at the moment, but
what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
I know the government will be knocking on my door in a minute. Did you just search for cognate on the internet?
Are you an L1 user?
Yeah, that's it. So linguistics, a cognate word. So it's from co meaning together, natus meaning born from Latin. So the word cognate itself is actually a cognate, meaning that the words come from the same root and we often use it for different languages, don't we? So yeah.
What are you saying, that a majority of languages are just made up of other languages?
Well, every single language.
And the whole point of language, is communication, not the dogmatic use of different types. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's loads, isn't there, in Spanish and English, with the shon and fion, and it's pretty much the same function, fion, and okay, there'll be subtle differences in meaning, but still, it's a massive resource. This is the thing, I've heard this before as well. This was a talk given by one of the co-writers of English File. I can't remember the guy's name, Paul something. Anyway, he gave a talk and he was saying how teachers are often quick to punish the so-called false friends, right? Like someone will say, because in Spanish, like actualmente means like now. Rather than actually, which means like really. So people would say actually, the Spanish people, and we call that a false friend. They might say something like, actually, I'm learning lots of English, and they mean to say currently, or actually, I have lots of exams, and it can actually, you go, oh, false friends, dun dun dun,
dun, dun, send the police.
Send the false friend, please. Put the hat of shame on.
Coffee cup.
Sit in the corner. You take your trousers off. All the rest of this stuff. And his argument was, we should be celebrating the attempt because 99% of the time, it's a real friend. It's not a false friend. It's kind of like you can actually apply the friend metaphor, can't you? You could kind of think, 99% of people are quite reasonable. But if every time you run into an unreasonable person, you go, oh my God, I have to watch out for those unreasonable people. Like before you know it, you're going to be going around sort of paranoid that everyone's an arse. Whereas actually most people are probably quite reasonable. So it's this is the idea. We should celebrate the attempt. So that really was a shift for me because honestly, even when I heard that talk, which was only about 4 years ago, I was still in that mindset of punishing false friends. Because working in Spain a lot, they do come up quite a lot. and you're kind of like, no, that's a false friend, and you go into your big explanation. And I think that's fine, but before all that, there has to be a kind of, that's a nice try. And most of the time when you try that, it's going to work, but not for that one, because unfortunately that one is a false friend. So it's kind of like praise and reward for the attempt, but then pointing out that it's actually, in that case, it doesn't work. And I think that's how you need to approach it, because you really do want to encourage the use of that. There's this kind of false idea that goes around in language learning, and it's epidemic in Spain, in my opinion, which is the idea that you have to think in English. It's almost like when you're in English class, you just discard your knowledge of Spanish and just learn from scratch English. And I just think that's such a load of nonsense, absolute, complete load of nonsense. Academically, that's been proved to be incorrect. It doesn't fit with the current theories about how languages are learned or how second languages are learned. It's totally nonsense. So it's an idea that we really have to get away from. And that's why, I'm keen on this idea of celebrating the attempt, even when a false friend pops up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's, we go through that process of learning, and the more that we add these roadblocks of, no, you did this wrong, the more the focus goes on to trying to avoid these roadblocks rather than trying to take further steps into actual learning of the language.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping with this next clip that we don't see any of these roadblocks, and what we see is a celebration of English in Russia.
It's going to be a comedy, isn't it? So I'll load it up.
This looks promising.
All right. So this is how Russians learn English.
Yeah.
My name is Anton. Every morning I usually get up at 7 o'clock and brush my teeth. Then I have breakfast and go to school by bus. Then...
Галкин, ты старательный мальчик, Галкин, старательный, и я ценю твое усердие, но произношение... Ужас! Тебя ж ни один англичанин не поймет. Нужно говорить так, как будто во рту у тебя горячая картошка. Горячая. Hot.
Hot.
Да нет же. Hot.
Hot?
Тренируйся, Галкин, тренируйся. Может быть, что-нибудь получится. Садись.
I went to the kitchen and cooked hot potato. О, готово. Горячая картошечка. Very hot potato. Ой, ай, чего?
What's happened, Галкин?
Good morning, Larissa Viktorovna. I'm sorry. I'm late. The traffic is terrible.
Галкин, какое произношение. Молодец. Но ведь можешь.
Okay, I can get it.
Садись. А вы, ребята, берите пример с Галкина.
Как у тебя получилось? Такое произношение? Супер. Да к черту это произношение! К черту это английский! Чего? Меня тут дома никто не понимает. И доктор сказал, что еще 2 месяца так будет. Горячая картошка.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what the hell that was all about.
So I think when he's speaking English at the beginning, this is my interpretation, is that he was happy and he's speaking English very, very well, talking about his nice little morning or whatever, and everyone's listening to him going, this is so cheerful. And she tells him to go and eat a hot potato, and he comes back the next day and he's all kind of like stereotypical kind of that Russian idea of just kind of like the morose kind of yes, and this is the life is terrible and it's very hard and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
So she's
amazing.
teaching him to speak English like a
With the Russian attitude.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, advice to the people who run that channel: don't put your bloody the recommendation cards when there's still like 3 minutes left of your video.
Yeah,
that was ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, okay. So, I mean, what can we talk about with that? Maybe the relationship between sort of personality and language or something.
I would say so, because I think, you know, with myself, when I've spoke different languages or with Spanish, I always felt a little bit like a different person when I was speaking with it, but that's beside the by. But you know how personalities affect language teaching. Is there anything that you could say about that? You know, with the learners or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit sort of, it's all interlinked in a way, isn't it? It's one of these things that, you know, language is so heavily linked to expression and also to some extent thoughts, depending on what sort of academic theory you want to believe. But I think it's fairly well accepted that at minimum, language can affect thought. So language can affect the way you speak. I mean, some people, to say that language is everything about the way you speak, some people might call that a bit pseudoscientific. But certainly the idea that language can affect the way you speak, I mean, it's a common theme in 1984 with the limitation of language to limit the ability of people to think thoughts that are against the government.
Yes, Lois Lowry, the giver, takes all the color out of the world.
Right. And NLP, you know, it's the idea that language affects us both consciously and subconsciously. They specifically make a big deal out of sort of ambiguous words that can have two meanings, right? And all this kind of stuff. So, you know, we can then go on to this idea of like, well, in Spanish, they've got, you know, ser and estar that they use for just the word be in English. And estar means something like to have a state, whereas ser is like intrinsically have a quality. So they differentiate to some extent. They differentiate intrinsic qualities from states, whereas in English we use the same word. You know, I'm happy or I'm a hard worker. There's no distinction between which of those is kind of a temporal state and which is an inherent quality of me. So then the argument could be, well, how does that affect the way that I am as a person? And that, you know, that's just talking about the actual content in terms of the lexical meaning. You could also then go into, you know, intonation and things like that, where people, you know, some people will, or most, I would say most language learners carry over a lot of intonation from their native language. Only kind of very, very proficient learners are able to swap that about. It tends to be one of the more difficult things or rarer things to happen when someone's learning a language, that they actually get the native intonation down. And, you know, it's something that, you know, a lot of students kind of celebrate if they get it, you know, because it means a lot to them. But again, it's one of those things where the academics might sort of, you know, say, well, we should just let people use their own intonation or whatever. You know, I don't know really about that. I mean, intonation is something that I think it's worth teaching to some extent, because it can definitely affect, you know, you've got your you know, it's I'm saying the same word but with a different intonation, and really, you know, and it can mean quite a different thing, can't it? You know, with the whole Russian morose attitude, you know, we're getting that kind of deadpan intonation, and that's obviously seemingly affecting their mood, but certainly how they're
It's going to
expressing
affect. It's going to
themselves.
affect communication, because you're going to be conveying,
Yeah.
that you're not happy or something like that.
Everyone thinks that Russians are super serious
Yeah.
because of it. Everyone in Europe anyway. They think that Russians sound super serious, right?
And
think
we've
Germans
seen
sound
from
really-
these episodes that we've just watched that pretty funny.
Yeah, well, that was the really interesting thing, wasn't it? How when he comes in and says his morose English, she like cracks out a smile and starts laughing. Like, well done,
She's like, I've broken another one.
But it is true that smiling in the street is peculiar. You don't smile at strangers in Russia. That's a real absolute. I've heard that from several Russians and Polish people who frequent Russia.
Oh.
So it's a cultural thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it has to be a bit of a personal choice on behalf of the student there, whether they want to adapt, as you were talking about before, this kind of second personality, because it can happen, or you can keep your original. And I think both are valid. We couldn't really imagine like Vladimir Putin like coming on TV and then instead of speaking his kind of, his English, which is like, hello, how do you do Russian accent? We wrestled the zibbers. That's French. You get the idea anyway. Couldn't imagine him coming on TV and going, "Hey guys, it's your boy," or whatever, or doing his Joe Biden. Come on, man. I mean, could you imagine Vladimir Putin going, "Come on, man"? It just seems so alien. But other people do, like you say, they have that separate personality. When I speak Spanish, I often kind of become this caricature almost, pero vamos a hacer una paella, okay? You get these kind of these strange personas you pick up along the way. And I quite enjoy that. I find it quite fun. It's just kind of a playful thing. And you're right. I do feel a bit of a different person when I'm speaking it. And definitely also when I speak, when I do my Japanese as well. Ohayo, konnichiwa.
Well, I think it's something that you can use in the classroom to aid learning. So, for example, working in Asia with the shyer, often you get shyer students, those that don't want to lose face, or where embarrassment in front of a class is a lot more important than maybe more in the West. So having role plays or having conversation dialogues or presentation speaking where they are not themselves but they are an assigned character, especially if you make it much further away from themselves, if they're a girl you make it a boy, or you make it an old man or something, or you make it a robot, then it gives freedom from their personality to be more open. And one particular example that I think about, and I think it stresses how important it is with communication, is when I had a debate class in Korea. There was all the students would have to speak, and one of the most important points in debate is not just your having solid arguments, which is obviously the most important point, but how you deliver those arguments as well, and that comes from intonation and the pauses and all that sort of thing. And
I do rhetorical skills, isn't it?
And I did have some very shy students, and I do remember speaking with one particular girl and saying, your English is great, your arguments are well thought out. You're fantastic, but no one's hearing them. And I remember telling her to try to find some English speakers that she thought spoke, powerfully, or that spoke with passion. I think passion. I told her, and I think she found a bunch of people, political. I'm trying to remember who it was that she found. I think it was just some from TED Talks, but she basically
okay.
it might have been. I wanted to say Clinton for some reason, but I don't think it was.
Well,
But,
I mean, he was a. If you
no,
mean,
she.
Oh, what,
she.
Hillary Clinton?
Yeah. I don't remember
I don't
her
know
being
about
a very
that. Bill
passionate
Clinton
speaker.
was a pretty good speaker, yeah.
But
I'm not sure about
I
him,
said, don't worry about being you. Just try to emulate and speak how you would imagine you are her. How would she say this? And first time she did it, nailed it, absolutely nailed it. And then, I mean,
so
it was
that role play thing.
Yeah, because she's like she's not thinking that it was her. She's thinking like she was.
Yeah,
I don't know
really
if
cool.
I don't know if it was because she was emulating, and she got more confident, or because she was so distracted with trying to be this other person while also speaking English. That helped. I don't know, but after that, she actually got a lot better, and she was one of the best in the class. She was pointing fingers and gesticulating, and it was a whole new leash of life. She got a great response, so I think that helped it as well. But being able to change that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a TBL thing you're suggesting to her as well, because it's like she does the task, you say this could be better this way, and then you've given her like an archetypal example to go and look at, find the things that she can take to improve hers, and then come back and do the task again, but this time with the new ideas and skills. I suppose it's also what they say in NLP, it's modeling, isn't it? You're modeling the person that you want to imitate.
Fake it till you make it.
Like. Something like that. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I've heard lots of those stories of shy students who become a different person in language class,
I used it all the time with reading. It was actually one of the biggest and easiest way to kind of mix up, doing reading. You do popcorn reading, something like that, and then you would have a roll of the dice and a list of characters on the board. Oh, you speak like a grandma, you speak like a robot, you speak very fast, speak very slow. And it adds a new element to it, and it takes. I don't know if it's the fact that you're taking away, they're having to put more cognition into being a personality and speaking, or if it's just fun or whatever. But it works.
Sorry, just shutting my window. The rain started. Yeah. Great. Agreed. Some interesting topics.
Yeah.
Interesting topics.
I'm not sure if we saw anything within those Russian clips that we would say was good teaching practice, but definitely we've got some
actually,
topics.
No, I do have something to say about that actually.
Sure.
Which was he did, I was kind of harping on before about this idea of thinking in English is a bad thing. And and I agree with that when people mean just kind of thinking in their head, about things. However, there's a technique which I advocate for fluency building, which is pretty much the only way I know of, or one of the most effective ways I know of, that you can improve your fluency without having a partner to speak to. And that's what I call thinking in English. And he does a version of it in that clip when he's going into the kitchen. He said he's speaking to himself. He actually speaks out loud even, doesn't he? And he says, I think he says, I went to the kitchen and I cooked potatoes. I wouldn't do it in the past. I'd do it in the present, because there's two ways that I talk to my students about doing it. One, I call describing the scene. So that one, it could just be describing what you see, but you could also be describing what you're doing. I'm going into the kitchen. I'm going to cook some potatoes, right? And this is a fluency activity. So, students will say, oh, but I don't know if I'm going to be saying it right. It doesn't matter. It's fluency building. When you're building fluency, you don't want to be worrying about accuracy so much. Instead, you're practicing those structures again and again and again, so that they come to your mind quicker when you're in conversation. That's the idea of building fluency. The other way that I do it is imaginary conversations. So that's doing what a story writer or a novelist would do when they imagine two characters in a scene and they start to imagine how those characters would talk to each other. You just do that, but you do it in your target language, the language that you're learning. So that's what I would refer to as the technique of thinking in English. And he does it with the out loud aspect, which can also be used as a form of pronunciation improvement. I went to the kitchen, I cooked some potatoes. Again, as I said, he does it with the past tense, which I think I would say don't do it so synthetically like that. It'd be a bit weird, unless you actually are just reflecting on your day and you said, what did I do this morning? I mean, that'd be a good one as well. What did I do today? Well, I got up at 7 o'clock. I had breakfast. My breakfast was a bit too hot, so blah, 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 whatever. That's where I think thinking in English can actually be a genuine technique, useful for students.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I'm very glad that we got something from those Russian clips that was pertinent and not something that we've covered before as well. That was great.
There you go.
And a fantastic way to wrap up as well. So if you're looking for learning anything more, not just about English, but about us, then go to teamteachchina.com, where you can find all my PowerPoint materials and other stuff in regards to teaching and learning English from myself, of Neil of Team Teacher. We have a corresponding YouTube channel, Team Teacher China, where we go over those materials, Team Teacher English, where we take those materials and put them into self-study videos, and Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into being a parent. Young Rich.
So you can go to youtube.com/Professor Rich for weekly live streams about learning English. I'm happy to take questions about teaching as well. I've been teaching for over 12 years now, and I've done all of the industry qualifications. So happy to talk about teaching for anyone who wants to ask. Also, if you'd like to come on the show, if you have anything interesting to say on the topic of education, you can get in touch with our press team at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com, and we'll get our army of secretaries to read and respond to your emails as soon as they can.
Yeah, and especially because we're in the Russian episode, if you are Russian, you've taught in Russia, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think, and come on the show.